As literary students, we might have a period in our studies when translation becomes an unavoidable task or a process because it is a method of dispersing not only language, but of deep understanding and interpretation of a work. However, translation is not a mere action of switching from one language to another, but another realm of art, an action of intricate combining and careful parting. Therefore, I would like to introduce Walter Benjamin's theory that can act upon us as a guiding light towards the endless discussion of what rules and boundaries translated works and translators must take. Walter Benjamin was a scholar who dug into various fields from various perspectives rather than concentrating on one discipline. His process of thinking has developed a lot into metaphysical and surreal concepts, which he wants to ultimately argue about the role of the translator and which is based on ideas and concepts in various fields. Through the metaphors he used to prove his theory, let's find out what Benjamin claims to be an ideal translator. Benjamin first forms a connection between translation and art. Both translation and art have the same concept of recipients. In translation, it will be a reader, and in art, it will be a spectator. Benjamin claims that both of these objects are not objects of respect. Like works of art, the literary works themselves have no purpose or responsibility for explanation, communication, and information delivery towards the reader. The essence of literature is unfathomable, mysterious, and poetic, and if you want to convey something simply for communication, it becomes non essential. Benjamin says translation is downgraded when it attempts to give an understanding to readers who don't understand what's behind the original text. Benjamin quotes, its essential quality is not communication or the imparting of information. Yet any translation that intends to perform a transmitting function cannot transmit anything but communication, hence something inessential. Translatability is also a keyword that appears a lot in this article, and it is a concept that starts with Benjamin defining translation. He defines translation as a form, one of several or many ways in which something is seen, experienced, or produced. Since the translation itself is a form of the original text, the possibility of translation of the original text must be used as a standard for the possibility. He has two questions about this. Can you find an adequate translator? Does the work allow or require translating according to its nature? Benjamin answers the second question by using the expression God's remembrance. Humans may remember lives or memories that they only have, that everyone has forgotten. If the nature of the event was said to be unforgettable, it would not be called a lie. Simply saying that it could only be done through the possibility of God's memory, not just the human realm. When reflecting this into translation, a certain meaning of the original work is expressed in the possibility of the translation of the original works, and attention was paid to the unknown possibility of the original work, not just conveying of the meaning. Benjamin argues that the translation potential of linguistic creation should be considered, even if it can be seen as impossible. So the question rises, to what extent should we consider the importance of translatability? Benjamin says that it is not that the original should be translated as it is, but the specific importance latent in the original can be more clearly expressed through the possibility of translation. No matter how good the translation is, it cannot be as important as the original, but the relationship becomes closer, considering the translation potential of the original. Just as we know that life is connected to the phenomenon but does not give much importance to it, Benjamin explains that translation is due to the current situation, the future of literary works, or survival in afterlife rather than its existence itself. Through the concept of life and afterlife, Benjamin defines the relationship between translation and the original text by reflecting it on a historical timeline. Translation itself occurs later than the original, and important works of world literature were not able to choose a translator when they were born, so translations exist as an extension of the life of the original. Benjamin describes this as afterlife. And in art, life and afterlife should be understood as a metaphorical objectivity. This is expressed by Benjamin's comparison to human life. He explains that he claims that life is defined when there is a history of each person, far from the role of the soul of or animal, which is the nature that changes then. When applied to translation throughout the history of great works, we have a number of things. For example, derivations from previous works, enlightenment in the artist's time, and eternity in later generations, which ultimately can be considered as fame. Translation expands its meaning when the period of fame comes, and it can be interpreted that this is not achieved only by the existence of the original. Benjamin continues to apply philosophical thinking to explain the relationship between translation and the original text. Benjamin says that when we consider the purpose of life, we must pursue a higher concept of expression of essence, not the superficiality of life itself at the end of life. When this is applied to translation, it is argued that translation cannot reveal the relationship of the hidden language, but it can be realized as an embryonic form. Benjamin expresses that this is done by kinship, or proximity between languages and language expressions, which is not realized in nonverbal expressions. No matter how different languages are, the essence of expressing them is the same regardless of when the work was made. But if kinship will be revealed accurately in translations or not is a question raised by Benjamin. Benjamin says that intimacy is more meaningful than expressing the indistinguishable similarity between the two works. In order to understand the relationship between the original and the translated version, it is necessary to prove the impossibility of imitation. This is because of the afterlife of the work, and the word in the fixed sense goes through the maturation process over time. The writer's literary style may also disappear, and there is also an inherent possibility in the creation of literature. Since both translation and original language are dead languages that eventually lead to extinction, Benjamin believes that only the totality of the intentions to supplement each other, not through ambiguous imitation, can be reached in order for language intimacy to be expressed through translation. What happens here is pure language. One example of this can be when words unique to culture, i- for example, traditional food or culture, is translated. Given the fact that the nature of these languages changes to the end of history, translation is more of a temporary way to solve the heterogeneity of the languages, and we must admit that the complete solution is impossible. Benjamin expresses this as a professional translation, and Benjamin explains these limitations through the comparison between religion. The translation believes that the direction one is aiming for is the ultimate and decisive, but the unattainable process is the same as the direction of religion. In translation, the part corresponding to delivery can be translated, but nevertheless, the true meaning cannot be conveyed. The relationship between content and language is very different between the original text and the translation text, in which the language of translation wraps the content like a boiling coke, and in the original language, it is integrated like fruit and skin. Benjamin uses an echo as a metaphor to explain the difference between. Ironically, the translation is what allows the original language to be transferred into a more clear area of language. Translation is necessary for the original language to be newly expressed even in other periods of history. In short, translation covers the actual language and remains coercive and unfamiliar. Benjamin believes that if translation is a unique form, the translator task also has a unique area that is different from the writer's task. Benjamin uses an echo as a metaphor to explain the difference between the original literary work and the translated version. The intention of literary works is not the totality of language, but only the connection of specific linguistic meanings. On the other hand, the translation brings the original work from the outside of the literary work. Unlike literary works, translation is to shout from the edge of a forest into the inside, not inside the forest of languages, so that the meaning of the original language sounds like an echo in a foreign language. In translation, the goal is to find the specific intention towards an object. The object is the echo of the original language expressed in translation. The intention of the poet is spontaneous, primary, and manifest. That of the translation is derivative, ultimate, and ideational. Benjamin places translation between literature and teaching, believing that it should not only aim for something different from the original, but also for something derivative, ultimate, and ideological. The answer to the role of the translator, or, as Benjamin quotes, ripening the seeds of pure language feels distance. The translator fidelity and freedom starts from the traditional concept of translations. If previous translations were given freedom in meaning delivery and words had to be faithful, this is not satisfied in the role of translation that must convey more than a meaning. Faithfulness never reproduces the original sense. Benjamin uses the vessel as a very effective metaphor for explaining what the ideal role of the translator is. When connecting pieces from a broken piece of pottery, even the smallest detail must be correct, because every piece will have its own individual characteristics. Likewise, rather than imitating the sense of the original, a translation should accept the way of meaning of the original in detail so that it can be understood as a part of a larger language, even when both the original and the translation are parts. Therefore, Benjamin argues the translation should avoid the purpose of communication and the delivery of sense. Therefore, it is not a compliment when the translation reads the same as the original. Rather, it can be recognized as a better translation or fidelity as enhanced by literalness. The true translation is transparent. It does not cover the original work or block the incoming light, but expands and shines the original work further through pure language. Some of the things that can be conveyed are limited in communication. It symbolizes something or becomes an object of a symbol depending on the context. Something that symbolizes something is a product of finite language, and an object of a symbol is the evolution of the language itself. The purpose is to express the nucleus of the pure language in itself. It is preserved in evolution as well. Pure languages is bound by linguistic elements and their changes, and within linguistic creations, there are only heavy alien meanings. In order to alleviate this, symbolization, that is, freedom of translation, must be demonstrated in the language of the translator. Therefore, it is considered that the task of the translator is to liberate the language trapped in the work through the recreation of the work. As a conclusion, the everlasting task and method a translator can utilize when following Benjamin's theory is knowing the difference between the conveyed and communicated.